Good to go.
All right, welcome everyone. Happy Friday. Thanks for joining Tech Academy's Tech Talk. Today we have a really special guest. We actually have one of our graduates, David Meyer, here, and they're going to talk about the importance of ongoing education. So thank you for being here, David, and take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I've been to a lot of these meetups before as an attendee, so it's a little different being on the other side of the equation for once. So, hope we do okay here. But yeah, so I'll just jump right into it. So I'll give a little background about myself. I kind of just wanted to share my story of how I got to where I am today, and then also just some stuff that I think is important as a developer or anyone even tangent to that industry. So a little about me. So some hobbies I have, I enjoy video games, reading, music, hiking, exploring. I mentioned this before the meeting started, but I like to get out and hike and just go around and walk and do stuff. I think it's a really good kind of way to just like unwind and relax and just you feel better. At least I feel better when I get outside and do stuff, and kind of takes me out of a headspace of whatever I'm doing. I graduated high school in 2012, so yeah, that's all I'll say about that. So I did go right to college out of high school. I started studying at Western Washington University up in Bellingham, and then I transferred to WSU Vancouver, so two schools in Washington State. I was studying business administration. I actually dropped out because I wasn't doing very well in school. I didn't really know why I was there. I think I was there just because I felt like I was supposed to. Like, my peers all went to college, and that was kind of like the unspoken thing was, oh, you finish high school, you go to college, and then you get a job. But I just had this kind of moment where it's like, I don't know what kind of job I'm looking for. I'm studying business because I had friends in that, and that would, it just didn't make sense to me. So I had dropped out. Um, and at the time, I had been working some various odd jobs. I'd done construction since I was a teenager. My dad owns a construction business, so he's a home builder, and so I'd work with him a lot, do those sorts of things, especially during the summers. But around the time that I started college, I started a part-time job at a store called Lowe's, so it's like a home improvement store. So I started as a lowly cashier there and just kind of did stuff. And I had an opportunity to go into a supervisor position there. And that was kind of around the time where I was questioning what I was doing in college and just didn't feel like a good use of my time. And so I took a promotion at Lowe's and started doing some management there for a while. And then transitioned into a project manager for a lot of the installations that the company was doing in the Northwest. So anything from having a microwave installed to a whole kitchen remodeled, I was kind of in charge of doing that. And again, after probably 6 or 7 years, I had that moment again of like, what am I doing? Like, I don't really like this. I'm bored almost. Like, I could do that job with my eyes closed. And that had led to like some other problems in my life. Like, I just wasn't fulfilled. It was just a job. And there came an opportunity where I could. It was kind of the writing on the wall at the company was, hey, you can either integrate into a different part of the company, or you can leave. Essentially, the position was being terminated, and so I kind of took a look at like what I wanted and what I was doing, and I just again came back to that thought of, I don't like, my heart's not really in this. I don't know why I'm doing this. So if not now, then like when would I make a change? um and so I had kind of thought back to some old like programming that I had done in middle school and high school. My friends and we would kind of tinker and play around and make little games and that sort of thing. Like, we had actually made a little program that we could put on a little flash drive for the school computers, and we had our own little like chat client on there, and it was just fun. Like, we were just messing around at that point. But more and more I was hearing about how technology was such a growing industry, and I'd actually heard commercials on the radio in Portland, Oregon for the Tech Academy for probably a few years leading up to this. I just remember hearing, learn to code and whatever. It's like, oh, it's interesting. Okay. So I think that seed was kind of planted at that point. I did some research, looked at some different boot camps, read some reviews. I don't remember the names of the other boot camps because I didn't select them, so I don't have any other information about them to remember. But eventually I settled on looking into the Tech Academy. So I had called someone there and done some, initial just having questions and all that, and decided to enroll in a boot camp. So I quit my job, and within I think a week or two, I had enrolled in a boot camp with the Tech Academy. So like I said, that was in March of last year now. March 2021. So I did the software developer boot camp, which I think is the longest one. But it was also the most inclusive, and I don't know, I liked the idea of learning as much as I could, and seeing where that took me. Like I said, I had a little experience with programming prior, but for all intents and purposes, it was new to me. Kind of messing around with little tools and stuff in middle school and high school. So like I knew about like what loops were and assets and that sort of thing, but really didn't have that much prior knowledge. So I averaged probably 35 to 45 hours a week of studying, just depending on, where I was at with life and what I was doing. So I went through all the coursework at the Tech Academy, which I really enjoyed it. I liked having a structured sort of program that, literally I could just go through. All right, today I am learning about fundamentals of programming. I could go through slides and answer questions. And I thought it was really cool that I was getting feedback so early too, from the course. There were different, I guess I call them like homework assignments, where they'd ask you to either solve a problem or, generate a response based on some question asked. And then I'd actually get a response from a real person, which I thought was cool. And so I can kind of get feedback on stuff. And there were some challenges, like literally they were called challenges in the Tech Academy coursework, where you'd be presented a problem, usually towards the end of a module. And you kind of have to use the skills that you were given to solve some problem. And a lot of times I had to search outside of the curriculum, which I didn't know this at the time, but that was going to be very indicative of what I always do is, there's always going to be new things that you have to go search and find. I think my favorite part of the whole course that I took at the Tech Academy were the live projects. So my particular course had 2 live projects. One was focused on C# and .NET, and then the other one, I believe it was Python and the Django framework. So they both were web applications. For all intents and purposes, we're kind of creating a web page with different functionalities. But it was great experience. It was probably the most stressful part of it, but also most exciting. Really getting in and feeling like I was doing a real project with real people, as opposed to just an exercise, make this array, do a bunch of stuff. That didn't quite feel real. So the live project was kind of like my first taste at like real programming. I started with some introduction to like DevOps. So with the program called Azure, so we had boards where we would then have user stories kind of broken up on there. And I should have got a picture of that, but I know some of you are probably familiar with Azure. But basically just a bunch of kind of like sticky notes that would then have tasks, and you could see what you were working on, what others were working on. And then, you'd figure out what this task is going to take. You'd have steps that went out there. You'd have like a project leader. So that was great, because even in my current job, I use Azure. And so I think it was a great asset to know, oh, okay, yeah, I have used that before, not an expert, but I know what it is. Another big thing was the version control. So figuring out how to make branches off of a master project, how to edit that, and then merge that, or do a pull request and have that be merged. And what do you do if there's a conflict? How do you resolve that? If the parts aren't all lining up. So having that knowledge was incredibly important. And then just like the critical thinking aspect of it, where it wasn't like the homework assignments where it was, kind of just a basic problem. Hey, do X, Y, Z. It was, all right, so now you need to implement an interface where you can create a record and then the user can edit it and do sorts of things like that. It wasn't super spelled out how to do everything. So to be able to think critically and go through these steps and implement this new feature was huge. And then I put this in bold, but just the asking for help aspect of development is just astronomical. I was embarrassed at first to ask questions or to say, I don't understand, or what am I doing wrong here? I'm getting an error. But, more and more in my current job, I'm noticing that, oh yeah, it's okay to ask for help. And I know that sounds so cliche, but it really is. And it's almost encouraged. Nobody knows everything. And especially being a newer developer, it's, I'm expected to ask questions and to get little nudges in the right direction. So I think that was just absolutely fantastic practice on that live project of, having to get guidance from a more senior person or from a peer, and realizing that they don't always all know the answers either, which was almost kind of reassuring. You'd be like, okay, let's work through this problem together, and then we maybe both learn something. So through that whole project or that whole course, I finished in September of 2021. So I think I took a little bit longer than what like the average time was. I believe I had to get an extension of like a week, but either way. So I had graduated in September, and then that led me into my job search. So the job search was quite a process. It was a lot of work. I feel like the job placement course at the Tech Academy did a pretty good job of mentally preparing me for what that was going to look like. They didn't beat around the bush. They said it was going to be difficult. It was going to take a lot of time, and it got a lot of really good advice out of that. A couple of things that I wanted to highlight that I think helped me from there were getting like my resume all set up and looking good. I had some help not only putting that together, but framing my experience as experience and not just, this was a school project. It was, no, I created an application in these technologies that did this stuff with a team of people to make it I don't know, just show as like real experience and just show as a nice resume, for lack of a better way to say it. I did a lot of interview prep. So we'd have some like mock interviews and questions with the job placement team, where we would just be asked questions or, pretend like we're in an interview and I'm being interviewed, and then be able to get feedback immediately about that. That was very helpful. I think these are still going on, but when I was still looking for a job, the Tech Academy students could have access to like kind of like a weekly roundtable of, we'd kind of go through some common interview questions or just different topics, and we could kind of speak a little bit more freely about things without quite the same pressure as a real interview. And I think that really helped me to kind of have some more on deck answers, and also just to be more comfortable answering questions, especially when I don't immediately know the answer to that. So that helped a lot. Oh, I see a note from Carly. Okay, you do still have this weekly roundtables. Right on. That's awesome. And then another aspect, which I've heard mixed like reviews or mixed advice on this. I personally think LinkedIn is great if you use it appropriately. So I, kind of tailored my LinkedIn profile to, be, I am a developer. Here's my skills, and would actively use that to search for jobs. Another thing that I did on LinkedIn was I noticed they had these like assessments or quizzes, and I forget what the exact names are, but either way, so they're all on specific skills, and they're not all necessarily about development. But I took some on like HTML and CSS, so they ask you a bunch of questions, and if you score within a certain percentile, you can then put on your profile, David has the certificate that he passed this test. Or object-oriented programming or specific programming language. So to have those on there, I could then get job recommendations that were looking for those, or employers could see those different qualifications that I had. And I don't tangibly know how much that helped, but I'm sure it didn't hurt. So I thought that was another one important thing. I probably averaged around 10 applications per workday. And I say work day because I kind of tried to average, Monday through Friday, pretty much for 4 or 5 hours a day. I would just be working on looking for jobs I could apply to, applying to them, filling them out the best that I could, actually putting real effort into that. And it was a lot of work. It really was. Some days were less, some days were more. I think my most in a day was something like 25, which that was a big day for sure. Um, and then on that note of the applications, um, if you are on the job search process and you're not already using this, use a spreadsheet to keep track of where you're applying. So even just the URL of what you're applying to, what the job is, who the company is, when you applied, and if you have like a contact name, if that's applicable, put that in there. Because then you get to 200, 300 of applications, and you get a callback from company XYZ. Like I didn't remember off the top of my head who they were, what they did, what the job requirements were, and so it was super helpful to be able to just immediately, control click, open up their website, see the posting, and it's like, oh, this company is looking for a JavaScript developer. Okay, I have an interview in 4 days, so I'm going to brush up on all of these things that they have listed in there so that I can speak to that a little bit better. And then also, oh, I can look at this company's website and kind of figure out what they're all about, what's important to them, and kind of see if any of those values align with my values, and then make that apparent at the interview. Um, and then I guess the other half of my time during my job search, when I was working, was just continued to learn new things, especially based on what I was seeing. So if I saw a lot of postings were asking for a JavaScript library called React, and I didn't know anything about that. And so, kind of starting to look for that and look for different things and just learning whatever I could to kind of keep my skills sharp, but also just learning new things. Um, so jumping into my current job, I work at a company called Plain Concepts. I think my official title is like a software development engineer, but primarily I've been doing web development, front end and back end. So we make a lot of websites that showcase different technologies for clients. Like right now, Microsoft is a big client of ours, so we've been building different websites for some of their AI technologies, or just other things that they're doing like that. So that's been really cool. Some of the technology that we use there. So our front end, React, which is a JavaScript library, is something that we have used a lot. We use, for styling CSS, or more specifically SCSS. We use a design tool called Figma, which I think is super helpful. It's kind of a way that, so for me, I get a document from the designers that is essentially a mock-up of how all the pages are supposed to look at different sizes. I can see down to the number of pixels, where different images are supposed to be spaced out. So that's a super handy tool. If anyone's interested in design, check that out. And then some other libraries like Storybook, which kind of keeps track of all these different reusable components that you can use on a page. And then for our backend, we use Node, C#, .NET, MySQL, CMS tool called Strappy for updating different information. And then for containers, we just use Docker. And I mentioned earlier, but our primary mode of DevOps is Azure. So I'll have like a board for each sprint, and I'll be able to see, my current tasks. I can see unassigned tasks, and either take those on. I can see what everyone's working on and that sort of thing. So I think I was hired at the end of November in 2021. So all in all, my job search was only about 2.5 months. It was less than 3 months. So I'm told that's pretty good. But again, I think a certain amount of it was just luck. I was in the right place at the right time. I contacted a company that was looking for developers. Clearly they liked me when they interviewed me, and so it kind of worked out. This position is fully remote, which is it's different. And it definitely has pros and cons. So some of the pros, I have a very flexible schedule. So I try and start around the same time every day, just because that helps me mentally, okay, I'm going to work now. I'll go down to my home office and, set up everything, go to work. But, if I want to go out and go on a walk, or I got to take the dog out, or I have to go shopping, or I have an appointment, like I can just go do that. Like I don't have to ask for time off and do all these different things. Which is such a culture shift for me, coming from, especially coming from a retail perspective, where everything was hourly. It's you go to your job, you put in your hours, you leave. So I don't know. I'm still getting used to that whole part of it. It's just so much more task oriented. Get focus on getting things done more than sitting there and putting in your time, if that makes sense. But then some of the cons of that are, I've got to hold myself accountable. And a good way of accountability is we have daily stand-ups every day, where we kind of just take 5 minutes and say, hey, here's what I worked on yesterday. Here's what I'm trying to do today. Here's some blockers I'm having with either stuff not working or I'm stuck. So that's a good way to be accountable for myself and for the rest of my team. Another big thing is, since I am however 100 many miles away from the office, like I can't just walk over to Steve's desk and be like, hey, I'm having trouble with fill in the blank. Can we go do some paired programming right next to each other? People can't see me struggle, so I kind of have to advocate for myself, and speak up and say, hey, like I'm stuck. I've been hitting this for 3 hours. I'm making no progress. Can you help me? And that's a little bit embarrassing, at least to me it is, to say I don't know, or I'm stuck. But I've touched on this briefly, but just I've noticed more and more like people want to help you, especially being new. That and for me to be able to show, hey, here's what I've tried. I didn't just immediately give up. It was here's where I'm at. How can you help? I don't want to get too off on the tangent of that, but just the point I want to make is that like people want to help, especially if you're willing to put in the work to solve the problem. So, and then as far as some of the tools that I have been using and continue to use for my for ongoing learning and education, excuse me. So I kind of made a list here of some things that I used. I classified these first ones as kind of like interview prep, because a lot of the problems and exercises that I found on these pages were a little less like practical in terms of day to day, but they did seem like great ways to improve your problem solving and potentially, have similar questions that you might see on like a coding challenge. So things like LeetCode, HackerRank, CoderByte, got cut off a little bit, but Edibit. And those are kind of fun too, because you get points, based on finishing challenges. You can kind of see your score, and at least for me, that's kind of satisfying to see the number go up. That's fun because I don't know, it's just arbitrary thing. But so those were good. I would try to do a couple of those sorts of problems a couple times a day, or at least a couple times a week while I was searching for my job, just to keep skills sharp. And always something would come up and it'd be like, this is an impossible problem, but slowly be able to work through it and either look at another example, or you learn a new process or a new idea, and then you can kind of just put that away, and that's another thing that you have in your skill set. Probably my favorite resource outside of the Tech Academy was a site called Free Code Camp. So I put in this little image here. This is kind of on their main page, but they have courses on a ton of different topics. So I went through their responsive web design and JavaScript algorithm and data structure courses. Lots of hours, like probably hundreds of hours of courses in there. Starts very simple, goes up to more and more complex topics, and then you have challenges that you can go through, submit answers to those challenges, and then compare them with other people's and see kind of, oh, that's how you solved that problem, or here's how I'm doing it. Why didn't this work? I don't know. I thought that was an absolutely amazing resource. So Free Code Camp, can't recommend that one enough. couple more that were a little bit more specifically tailored were sites called like Udemy or Domestika. And I was a little bit wary of Domestika because like I got like an advertisement for it. It's like something like a creative JavaScript course, and it was on sale for like $9. It's like, all right, I'll check it out. And it was really cool, making different like animated shapes, and used a lot of like random noise to make these cool things. And it's probably 15 hours of study in there, but basically gone through. It's like a user created course where they're teaching and they have projects that you can make. So the one point I'll make about those sort of things like Udemy and Domestika is to like read the reviews, and they are user rated too. So if you see 10,000 reviews, 4 out of 5 stars, it's probably pretty safe. If there's 3 reviews and 2 stars, maybe, I don't know. I mean, proceed with caution, I suppose, at that point. So I guess that's one drawback of having user created content, is that it may be hit or miss. It's not as homogenous as something like FreeCodeCamp would be. I learned a lot too just by looking at different things on YouTube. I learned a lot about React, just different web development concepts, just by Googling, hey, React tutorial, let's see what's going on. And some of them are more helpful than others. Some of them are more wordy. Some of them have expectations of prior knowledge. But even if I didn't understand the whole thing, just there's little bits and pieces that I could then pick up, and then I'd be able to, at a later point, be like, oh, right, yeah, I remember that now. That's from, this goes with this now. And yeah, just the learning curve is not linear. There's some times where it just feels like you're not getting anything, and then, oh, these 4 things all just bump together, and now this makes sense, which can be frustrating. And then also just building some projects. You can either follow a tutorial or start with some sort of template and go from there. I made, to learn some new technologies, like I think with Vue, which is another JavaScript framework, like I just made a weather app that took information from the weather API. I've made a few projects with an API from Marvel. And so the response from the API gives you like a bunch of character names, like descriptions, comics, like which ones they're related to. And it's a great practice in making a basic web page that can have an index page that shows characters with images, and then have a details page where then you can then show more information. So it's I don't know, those were great too. So just any level of a project that you can just start doing, even if it's just the infamous classic to-do app or something like that, just something to get started, and then you can slowly add features to make that more complicated. So why is it important to continue learning? So there is always something new to learn. That's kind of a life thing, but also just in technology. Every single day I come up with something that's like, I don't know what this is, or I don't know how to implement this, or I don't even know what the technology is. So I'm having to learn and research and do things. Sometimes you can get down a rabbit hole of, all right, well, I need to get from X to Y, but then, oh shoot, it's taking me all over the place. So we can just, I don't know. It's important to learn because you're going to go through all that, and just having those little bits kind of puts that puzzle together a little bit quicker. There's always new ways to refactor your old code. So to do things in a better way, whether it's more efficient in terms of computing power or easier to read, that's super important. Another important reason to just always continue learning is, I made this word up, I think, or maybe my boss did, but re-architecting projects using like a newer, better technology. So right now, a new task that I have that's going to keep me busy for quite a while is taking an old website that was developed with handlebars, which I have never used that. I've heard it's a JavaScript like framework or library, but it's like 10 years old. So we want to redo that with React instead. And it's going to be easier to read. It's going to run better. It's going to be able to be maintained because a lot of the stuff from handlebars is deprecated, meaning there's not support for it anymore. So that's another huge thing, especially when you have contracts or sort of things where you're just maintaining an existing website more than you are making a brand new thing. I kind of touched on it, but technology is constantly changing. There's always new things. Whether it's just a new way to do something or a new technology, it's always changing. And so to have your one skill set, eventually, the line is going to keep moving for what's in favor. And if you stay in that one place, eventually your skills aren't going to be useful anymore. And I guess just to wrap that up, like, you're never really done learning unless you do the same thing every single day. And I mean, I guess that's kind of like where I was at with my old job, where I really was doing the same thing every day with my project management. It was just boring. I didn't have anything new to learn. It was just, that's what it is. But with development, there's no shortage of new things to learn and new things to do, and new ways to improve. So that can be very overwhelming. But I've kind of come to the realization that I'm not going to have all the answers. I'm not ever going to be at a point where it's like, all right, I got this. It's easy. Maybe certain things come to me quicker, but it's never going to get to that point where I can do this with my eyes closed. And I think I'm okay with that it's always going to be there's always going to be something new, I guess, is what I'm just trying to get at with that. Kind of jumbled that up a little bit, but yeah. So, I mean, I think that's why it's very important to just continue learning, and whether that's officially learning, quote unquote, with like a school or a program or a boot camp, or unofficially learning with, on your own time, or just research, or other things such as that. So, yeah, if anyone has any questions or comments, I would love to hear them or answer them best I can.
All right. The best way to ask questions is in the chat box here. If somebody wants to raise their hand, we'll open the mic and let you ask a question verbally. Well, I've got a question for you, David. What would you say were the top things that helped you get your first job after graduating the Tech Academy? Like a great GitHub portfolio, and what else?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if anyone looked at my GitHub portfolio. They never mentioned it. Doesn't mean they didn't look at it. But I think my resume was a big one. I spent a lot of time kind of curating that. And I had help with that too, but just making it look in such a way where it phrased my experience as experience. Something I've heard and seen with a lot of people do is they kind of put themselves in this box of, oh yeah, I've made projects, but they were in school, or it was part of an assignment. And it's like, you don't even need to, I don't know. I feel like you kind of just put yourself in this little box where it's like, yes, I've done school projects. It's like, well, no, like, you have experience, you've done the thing, like, just phrase it as that. And it's hard when, like, I've worked on that resume for a long time and made it look a certain way, or to me it's just like, well, yeah, that's just what it looks like. But I don't know, I think that was important. I think another factor just in finding a job was the sheer number of applications. I probably put out 300-ish applications, and there was probably a total of 5 or 6 interviews with different companies out of all of that. So yeah, totally a numbers game with that.
I guess you had some good help from our job placement team.
Yeah, they were great. I think Carly's on this call. I worked with her. I also worked with Brett. Yeah, they were fantastic, super helpful with, like I said, the mock interviews. Those were nice. Just having a sounding board for resumes, and looking at formats and all that. Yeah, that helped a ton.
Awesome. Well, we got a few questions in the chat. So Albert's asking, where was your primary place you went to look for jobs?
Yeah, so I looked in a couple different places. I signed up for probably too many job boards, but lots of different places where you can just put in your resume and look for different keywords. So like ZipRecruiter, Indeed.com, I think the number one place that I found jobs though was actually through LinkedIn. And again, I've heard mixed reviews on what people think of that. Some people have been like, "Oh, that's terrible," and other people are like, "Oh, yeah, that's pretty good." But I would search for developer roles, and for a long time, I was searching for junior developer roles only, and I didn't find a lot of results. And I think at a certain point, I don't remember who it was that gave me the advice, but they basically said, like, just apply for not anything, but if you know 50% of the technology on that list, and assuming it doesn't ask for 10 plus years of experience, just apply. So once I kind of expanded my horizon a little bit, I had more things that I could apply to. And if I was seeing things that I didn't understand on the requirements, all right, put that on my list of things to learn. But so, like, for example, the job that I'm at currently, on the job posting, they had asked for a minimum of 5 years experience with front end development, specifically with React. Well, when I applied, I had maybe like 2 hours of experience with React, so not very close to 5 years. But eventually I got hired for that position. So I don't want to get too off on a tangent on it, but I think a lot of the job requirements and postings are a best case scenario from the employer. It's kind of I would love to have all of this. Maybe we'll get half of it or whatever. But I guess my point is just to not don't self-censor yourself out of an opportunity because you think, oh, I'm not ready for that yet, because I don't think you'll ever feel fully ready. And if you are, I think you're overqualified for that at that point, and you would then be unfulfilled at that, or not get it because you're overqualified. So just don't self-censor yourself.
Great advice. All right. Carly's actually asking a question. She's saying, were you working on projects during your job search then? And you would recommend this, right?
Yeah. So I kind of split my time probably 60-40 between job applications and search, and then 40% just research, working on little projects and that sort of thing. So again, they were very simple projects that I was working on, but it kind of helped me stay in that mindset. So stuff like I think I made a weather app in like 3 different languages, and just doing like little things like that. So I would recommend doing it just to kind of keep yourself in that mindset of how do I develop, how do I program? Because I think it's easy to go way too far one way or the other, where you're full tilt job search. I'm doing all this stuff, and then all of a sudden it's been 2 months and you haven't touched a computer, and you forget some stuff. Or go the other way of, oh, I got to learn more, I got to do more stuff before I'm ready. Then all of a sudden you're a 10-year plus student, which is great, but not if the goal is to get a job.
Great. Okay. Next question. So do you recommend any certifications on top of a degree? What are your thoughts on certifications in general?
Yeah, so I guess I don't feel like I'm qualified to say that I recommend any certificates, because I don't have any myself. My opinion on them is that they can help you stand out in terms of like an applicant pool. So there's 30 people and one person has, I don't know, like a AWS cloud storage certification, and it's a cloud engineering position. Okay, that person's probably going to be more highly favored than someone who doesn't. So if you kind of know what sort of angle you want to take and then get a certificate in that, go for it. Or just choose something and then, kind of go that direction too. So I think they're great in terms of standing out or getting better experience. But I don't have super strong opinions on them personally.
Okay, next question. So do you actively learn new skills even if your job currently does not require them? And in the future, do you see a huge gap between the growing demand of programmer skills and those who don't code? Where do you start, and how do you organize the skills you must learn?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll start with that first part. So do I actively learn new skills even if my job doesn't require them? Um, like, yes, I don't go out of my way to learn things that are completely unrelated to my job. A lot of the things that I learn are related to web development. I'm not going to go spend half my day learning about, like, I don't know, like data science with Python, because that just doesn't help me in what I'm trying to do. But my company is kind of cool where they give each person like an allowance each year where they can use that for ongoing education. There's like a submitting process and all that to get it approved, but you basically get a credit where, like, hey, I want to take Microsoft's course on, .NET. It's a very specific thing. I can go do that. I spent, like, even just yesterday, I spent probably half of my day just researching TypeScript, because I know I have a project coming up that's going to relate to. And so I guess you could make the argument that, oh, well, I'm doing it because it's part of my job, but kind of yes and no. But I also like to learn new things, and it's kind of a nice break just to be like, all right, let's check this out for a little bit and just kind of switch gears, because I think there is a lot of overlap. Then in terms of, do you see a huge gap between the growing demand of programmer skills and those who don't code? I don't know. That's so broad. In my limited experience, I feel like there's like a large group of people who know some basics, know some fundamentals, and then maybe there's some employers who want a very specific thing, and there may not be an all overlap there. And then there's a small pool of people who know everything, but their value is very, very high. I don't quite know where I'm going with this. I guess it's an investment to get a developer. And that's something that I've had to kind of tell myself, like, I'm an investment to my company. Like, I don't need to be right out the gate churning out stuff like left and right and just going crazy, because it's going to take some time to integrate into where you're trying to go. And I'm sure there's always going to be a demand for programmers. I've heard talk of, oh, the robots are going to take our jobs, but I feel like that's always going to be a thing. And then last one, where do you start and how do you organize the skills you must learn? That's kind of on like a need basis. So, like, for example, I have a project that I'm starting where I have to integrate an old project made in a framework called Handlebars and basically remake that in React. And so my thought process is, all right, I don't know how Handlebars works. I know how JavaScript works, though. So I need to learn the basics of Handlebars so that I can figure out what all this code is doing so that I can replicate it in React. So I guess it's kind of a need basis. So what's coming up soonest? Do I know enough about all those things? If I don't, all right, that's at the top of my list. And then I guess below that would be, what do I find interesting, or what have I heard about that I just want to check out and I think is cool? And not that I spend all my free time looking up stuff, because I don't. I like to mess around and do stuff that's just not smart related all the time. But mostly I prioritize my learning based on what needs to come up, because then I can feel better about going to work when it's like, okay, yeah, I do feel prepared, or at least slightly more prepared than if I just came out of that completely out of the blue. So kind of a long-winded answer, but I hope that helped.
Okay, next question. So how difficult was the workload during your first month of the job?
Yeah, that's a good one. I had a lot of trepidation about that first week coming up, and kind of knew I'd have the grace of being like the new guy, and so I don't have to do all this crazy stuff. But like, I'll be honest, it was pretty overwhelming. Not undoable, but pretty overwhelming, just in terms of, all right, here's your onboarding process. Here's all the different programs that we use. Clone this project and see if you can run it. And, that took me 3 days on its own. And I honestly, I felt like I didn't get anything done at all. But we have like a one-on-one feedback session, like once a week for like the first 4 to 6 weeks or something. at the company. And so basically you get to have a formal sit down to be like, hey, how do you think you're doing? How do you think we're doing? Kind of get some feedback. And so I think that is super important. And if it's not it's not something that the company offers, just ask for it from someone higher than you. So I think that's super valuable, because I came into that thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not getting anything done. Like, I'm probably going to get fired. Like, just all these thoughts, like, oh, they made a total mistake hiring me. But I actually got, good feedback. It's like, oh no, you're getting stuff done. You're asking questions. And I don't know, just kind of have that tether to reality. So honestly, it was very difficult. Not that the amount of work, I didn't have so many tasks. It was just that it was just difficult to integrate into that. But even looking back now, looking at that first project I started on, it's like, oh no, I do kind of know how stuff works now, and it just takes some time, and can be frustrating and can be overwhelming. And I'm trying to remember that as I start another new project. It's like, I don't know what this is. This is scary, and that's gonna always just keep coming up. So yeah, great question. So I guess the short answer is it was overwhelming, but it gets better.
Awesome. Okay. I think one last question. How would you answer the question in the interview if they bring up a bachelor's degree? Like a bachelor's degree.
Oh, I'm assuming they mean like a college bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
I guess for me personally, and I'm not quite sure what the question would be, if it was like, why don't you have one, or why should we hire you if you don't have one and someone else does? I would kind of emphasize the practical experience that I do have, from the boot camp, from doing real projects. I've heard from some computer science students, which, don't get me wrong, that is a super important education, and you learn a lot, you get some great fundamentals. But people who have been in there for such a long time and haven't touched any code, have done these very almost old school ways of doing things, and it's that's not practical, helpful knowledge. Sure, fundamentals are very powerful and very strong, but if you don't, I don't know, I guess I would just emphasize the practical skills that I have done. I have done some programming, I have made some applications, and here's why I can pick this up so quick. So I guess that's what I would kind of try and emphasize if I was asked about that, and didn't have one, because I don't.
Great. Okay. Sherry actually has a question, so maybe this is the last one. I'm not sure, but if you do, leave the questions in the chat box. So, what's an example of something that used to feel overwhelming that you overcame? Could be overwhelming or scary.
Yeah. There was a lot of things with that, but I guess so. Just starting out with my very first project that I was working on, at the company. So, I kind of knew the basic steps. I had used the Azure boards, so I knew how to, click the clone repository button. So I got it on my machine. I made a branch, so a version of that program that I could then edit. And then I was trying to follow the instructions in the README to get it started. And it was 8 pages long, and just the longer I was reading, it was oh my gosh, there's a local hosting, there's backend, there's production, there's pre-production, there's post-production. I don't know what all this is, and just getting more and more overwhelmed. And eventually I got some clarification on just how to run it locally, how I could see the front end. So basically how I could see what the web page looked like. Didn't necessarily have all the data in it, but it was, what it looked like. So I, eventually got that running, and then started working on a task of, I think it was something I had to add and change some images. So I'd figure out where to source those, where to resize them. And it just looking at the task starting out, it was impossible. It's I have to get this whole program working. I have to figure out all this documentation. I have to find where these image files are. I have to figure out how to put them in the project. And now, oh my gosh, now depending on what page, I have to have it display something else. So it was just very overwhelming, but taking it one little step at a time, looking back is oh yeah, okay, cool, I got that all done. And I know it's a very cliche answer of one step at a time, you figure it out, but that's kind of, yeah, just helps to do that. And not to get too on a tangent, but like on the tasks that I'm assigned, a lot of times it'll just be a couple lines of things, which is just the end goal. But I found that if I like physically write out under that task, all right, what's step one, what's step two, or work backwards, okay, that's the final step. What has to happen before that, before that, before that? That helps a ton. Doesn't necessarily make it easier, but it makes it more manageable, where you can then focus on one thing at a time.
Great response. All right. Any other questions? Nope. Well, if you do think of anything and, after the tech talk, here is David's LinkedIn, so you can definitely contact him on there. Is that a good place to get in touch with you, right?
Yeah, I was just about to say I was going to grab it if you didn't have it, but yeah, no, if you want to connect with me there and send me messages, I've met lots of people from meetups that I love just to chat with and do stuff. So yeah, send me a request, and if you just have general comments or you have questions or you just want to chat, I check that a couple times a week, so I'd be happy to talk to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I just put that in the chat box, so you guys can definitely connect with David on there. Everyone's thinking in the chat box. Also, just to let you guys know, we have another Tech Talk next week. We actually have one on open source software. So if you want to join that talk, you're definitely can RSVP on our meetup page. I'll put a link in the chat box. It's going to be at the regular time, so it's going to be from 1 to 2. But yeah, so thank you guys for joining. Thank you, David, for joining today's today's Tech Talk.
Class. I can call it class.
Good class, David.
Good class.
Hey,
happy to share. Thanks for being a good audience.
Thank you so much.
Hey, David,
really appreciated.
David, I'm curious. Did you grow up in Whatcom County in Bellingham?
I didn't know. I grew up in Vancouver, Washington, which is just north of Portland, Oregon. So
which is where I am now.
Oh yeah, because that's where Tech Academy is. So yeah.
Yeah. I lived in Whatcom County for 11 years. That's why I asked before I came to Portland.
Yeah, I spent about a year and a half up there doing college at Western, but then I've moved back. But yeah, I miss it up there. I'd like to take a trip up there again sometime. It's beautiful. It
is. All right, thanks, David. Great presentation, and I want to thank everyone for coming out. It's been awesome, and it's supposed to be a beautiful weekend, so definitely enjoy it.
Yeah, make sure you go out, enjoy the sun, and then we'll see you next week. So thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, David.
All right, everybody. Have a good weekend.
You too.